Yeah, good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here, and I'd like to talk to you about digital supply chain transformation. And I know that's kind of a clunky title, but I wanted digital in front of supply chain rather than in front of transformation, which it seems to be most of today. What I'd like to start off with, though, is Dow and where we're at with our journey. And it turns out, if you haven't followed, we merged back a couple years ago with DuPont, and we're about to spin off into 3 companies now. So we've taken the combined strengths of the 2 companies and formed 3 very focused companies, one in materials, and that'll be the new Dow, and then Corteva as an agricultural materials company, and then the new DuPont will be a advanced materials company. And so you think about it, the Dow employees are not only dealing with this digital transformation and all it has to do with, but now we're actually been under immense change in terms of the company that we're working with. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit more about Dow now. So there's a lot of fun facts here. I want you to focus on kind of the last 3. Number 1, you can see that Dow has a very complex market participation in terms of the number of products and where we're operating. And the third point is even more important, is the amount of spend we have in R&D. And traditionally, Dow's R&D spend has been focused on product innovations and process innovations. And I'm happy to report now, as part of the supply chain function, our supply chain leadership is looking for innovation in the supply chain space to the point that it's disruptive and that it produces competitively advantaged IP. And in fact, last fall, we submitted 2 provisional patents in this area around the digitalization of supply chain. So a lot of push from upper management to move ahead in supply chain and digitalization, but certainly it spans both manufacturing and engineering, marketing, and R&D as well. A little bit more on the complexity and the scope of supply chain, because we're going to talk a lot about that here. And you can see the number of suppliers we have, the amount of warehouses, facilities, the immense amount of material we're moving around, and how often this is occurring on a daily basis, and then even the size of our logistic operations. And in fact, if you look at the capital investment we have in our logistics, it rivals any of our manufacturing producing businesses, or our product producing businesses. And so now we're looking at how do we start to move into a kind of a process innovation in logistics in the same way we've been doing it in our businesses in the past. Talk a little bit about the journey we're on in digital supply chain. And it's a journey that we really consider we've been on for quite a while. And it's not just, this year we're going to go digital. We've been preparing for this. We've been changing along the way. And I was looking at this last night, and I realized that in my career, I've experienced just about every one of those taking place, because today is the 40th anniversary of my employment at Dow. And of course, that made me think, geez, I've been at Dow 1/3 of the time they've been in existence. Yikes, right? But, after we got off, we started with this focus on efficiency, and this was really led by our manufacturing and our process control function, where we got into this idea of state-based control, and I'll refer to that a little later, and that allowed us to institute our operational excellence, consistently and automatically. We then moved into the globalization, so we got away from regional businesses and looked at global businesses. We looked at single function processes. And this started to get us to focus on this process, and Greg talked about business processes, and this is where we really started to focus not just on chemical processes, but business processes. We got into business envelopes because we're vertically integrated company, so now we're not individual businesses, but we're starting with primary chemicals like ethylene and going all the way downstream, and how is that organized. So we went end to end now, not just within a function. We got into this bimodal, so now we got to run the business, and we're also trying to innovate to get at the same time. And the last thing that we've done now, which I think is very important, especially listening to what took place this morning and some of the issues that the keynote speakers brought out, we're looking at focusing on customer experience and employee experience. And so this gets at, not focusing on the technology, but what's the business outcomes you want to drive with technology, and how do you distill that down into some rallying cries. And so we want to really improve customer experience, and how do we translate that into technical solutions. And then employee experience is very interesting because we're talking about this culture change. And if you look at focusing on the employee's experience, that brings about a culture change through the improvement in their experience through the application of technology. So I'm very proud that our upper management drove to these two key areas after especially what I've been hearing at this conference. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the digital transformations that are already underway that we've already put in place. One is moving to dynamic network optimization. So traditionally, Dow built very sophisticated network models to optimize our very complicated supply chains, but we only exercise these models once every 2 or 3 years. We've gotten to the point now where we can pull data and stand up a new model almost with the push of a button, and that way we can have more flexible supply chains that are responding more quickly to market changes. We're moving to the point where these models will be running online and basically telling our business leaders when it's time to make a change and providing them some insight on that. In procedure automation, we've instituted smart tablets in the field for our operating technicians. And this has taken away the paper that they've been processing. And we're now moving to augmented reality and virtual reality as part of the equipment they're using, ultimately moving to machine learning applications with those smart devices to help them make their decisions in the field. Obviously, analytics and reporting, everyone's is moving there, and we're doing the same. We're backing this up with the idea of a data lake and pulling all the data from manufacturing, from supply chain, from external sources, making that available, and then providing business leaders with a very quick look at some analytics that they can make decisions with today. Where we're moving to is, providing more machine learning behind those analytics to further improve their decision making or more automatically, to automate some of those decisions. We've been in shipment visibility now, so we can see the location of our rail cars, of the carriers' trucks that are moving our equipment, of our ocean-going vessels that are carrying our freight. We're making the step now to make this available to our customers so they can see where their shipment is at any point in time. And then we're trying to do this automation, and that's the piece that I've been concentrating most on. So how do we automate some of these decision processes, some of these operations that take place in supply chain? The little cartoon there I have shows a deep neural network as being part of this production planning exercise. So I'd like to now talk about and Greg didn't give me credit for this, but I'm going to take it now, Greg. I'm talking about business process. If you look at a supply chain, we've focused a lot, at least in Dow, on the material flow side. So how do we move material from supplier into our plants, to our distribution centers, onto our customers? How do we automate these? How do we build models along that material flow path? And a lot of the discussions that I've seen in the conference are really focused on that piece. But behind this is a big transactional process with a lot of different decision makers passing information to each other, and for that supply chain to work, that transactional process also has to work. And In fact, as a process control engineer in my youth, I take a look at, what goes on in these transactional processes, and I see a lot of opportunities that I've listed here. And I think, this is where there's a big opportunity for automation and for the application of digital technologies. Let me further make that point with this slide. Dow has this software called Celonis, where if you extract information from your ERP system, especially around change logs, it can look at what's the path a order takes from the time it enters until you issue the goods to your carrier. And in this case, there's 175,000 or so orders that I analyzed with the software, and it breaks out the path each order will take through the system. If it worked very well, you'd get the order, you would create the delivery note, and then you would issue the goods. But it happens, there's a lot of things that can occur with an order, and it's all these other routes that they take that cause delays, that cause our customers to be less happy with us than they could be. However, if you look at what that represents, it looks a lot like a batch process. So my suggestion is that we can look at these transactional processes through the eyes of process automation, and I know a lot of individuals in this conference are either from process industries or represent process control vendors, and we're finding that as we start to look at how to re-engineer our processes, how to improve them, all the experience we have in process control is useful to apply in this case. And we're actually giving us ideas on how to go about this in a much more structured manner than just applying, robotic process automation where we think might be interesting. So I do want to talk about one other application that we're very excited about, we're making a lot of progress on, and this is the use of real artificial intelligence for production planning. And in this case, what we're looking at is the application of deep reinforcement learning, whereby you teach the computer or the algorithm to perform a very complex decision task. And this is the same technology that, if you've been following, has been used to teach computers to play video games. And in fact, as we've been using it, looking at it, what we're trying to do is improve our businesses and help them with the fact that the planners that they hire into these positions tend to move out very quickly, and so you're having to retrain them again. They're working in a very dynamic situation with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of dynamics, and it's very difficult even if you're well trained in this area. What you see on the right is some results of training this artificial agent. And it starts off, the agent knows nothing about how to do the planning of this particular process we're training it on, but over time it becomes very good at it. And in fact, if you look at the scales there, it's basically 10,000 years of training. But now I have the most experienced production planner, that we've ever had in Dow. So very excited about this. This is a little bit of a moonshot, but the interesting thing about this is we continue to make progress here. We'll probably be demonstrating this in a business yet this year. It's all based on open source software, which I think is very interesting. Greg brought up some comments around the changes in, the software market. And I'm really excited that you can go out to open source, find these kinds of technologies. There's blogs that really provide a lot of information on how to get after this. And we're making a lot of progress here. I can tell you that we're moving from the idea of how to make this work to now how do we scale this because it's going to work. So, where this is all taking us to is looking at that transactional process again, but putting in place artificial intelligence, machine learning, process control-like applications that either help to help the human decision makers within this process, or actually replace them. And what we really have the vision for is, as we have done in our production plants, where you have the operators now in the control room managing the process and not worrying about the position of valves and the temperatures in particular parts of the process. We'd like to have our decision makers really managing an overall supply chain network, not focused on just individual pieces. We think this is very possible. So, lessons learned, this may be a little presumptuous, but at least key messages I'm trying to bring home here is transactional processes can be the next frontier of automation. So we've done a lot on the physical side. There's these decision processes. They're ripe, they're a target-rich environment. I truly believe process control methods can be applied in a very effective manner to reach this automation. Machine learning and artificial intelligence is certainly a big opportunity. In a sense, it is this shiny new object, but I think there's a lot of application. And I think total automation is really within reach. And so we can really get to this whole digital environment in supply chain, within operations, and other places. That's all I had. Thank you for listening to me. I look forward to the questions.